What's up, y'all? She from Legacy Hustle here. I have a little request of you. If you truly appreciate what we're trying to do here and you enjoy the show, the sharing, the transparency, and the insights, as well as the inspiration we bring you with each and every episode, I need you to help us out as well by supporting. Go ahead and subscribe, like, comment, follow, and review as we work to get the word out to more people about the show. Also, please consider sharing the show with your entire network. Thank you. Enjoy the show. What's up, y'all? This is Legacy Hustle, a show that will highlight and amplify the stories of Black entrepreneurs and their products or services that are impacting preceding generations, future generations, or just cross-generationally. We use the word legacy not only to describe the solutions that they've created, but to also acknowledge their impact on their own family or personal circles through wealth generation and creation. This show is going to explore what their business is, how they got it off the ground, and the trials and tribulations they've experienced on their legacy hustle journey. To both inspire and educate you, our listeners, who I'll refer to as our legacy hustlers. I'm Sheed. I'll be your host in this episode. We'll be talking to Dr. Christopher Gay, an accomplished board-certified anesthesiologist and interventional pain specialist based in Anchorage, Alaska. He's originally from North Carolina, where he attended Duke University for his undergraduate work and subsequently earned his medical degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. After completing his residency and fellowship training at New York's Presbyterian Hospital at Columbia University, he practiced as part of a large pain practice in Northern Virginia before moving to Alaska. That's right, said it again, Alaska, y'all. He went on to 2015, found the Alaska Center for Pain Relief, and he continues to live in the Pacific Northwest with his wife and family. Without further ado, we're going to get into this episode where he talks about why he moved all the way to Alaska, how he got his business set up, and how others who may also be medical professionals can take a path similar to his. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to Legacy Hustle. Thank you so much, Dr. Christopher Gay, for being here with us today to share words of inspiration around Alaska Center for Pain Relief and how you got that going. So wanted to effectively dive in, but before I do, is it okay if I call you Chris or
Certainly.
Dr. Gay? What's your preference?
No, it's good to be here, Rashid. Thank you for having me. So certainly feel free to call me Chris. I think that'll make things flow a little easier.
Sounds good. All right, Chris. So can you tell us a little bit about the Alaska Center for Pain Relief and where you got the inspiration for the idea and got started?
Depends on how much time you have. The story goes back a ways. I'm actually from the East Coast. I grew up in North Carolina, went to Duke for undergrad and went up to do my training in New York City at Columbia University. And then after that, I moved to Northern Virginia. And we picked that because my wife was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was from North Carolina. And that was just about the halfway spot. We thought that was going to be our forever home and actually went so far as to build our own home there and then decided things weren't going in the direction that I liked clinically with patients. The practice I worked for was a very large practice. And the way they do things is a little bit different than I would have preferred. And so I started looking around for different options and stumbled upon Alaska quite literally. It wasn't on my list of places to live. Probably wasn't even on my list of places to visit before that point. But, I saw a recruiter ad and I'm looking for a job. I get a recruiter ad and the number of numbers after the dollar sign were actually pretty impressive. And so I had a contact.
Your eyes in Alaska.
It certainly did. It was like, hey, something's going on out there. I don't know what it is, but I need to check it out. So I had a contact that lived here. He was actually a physician. He was the head of one of the departments when I was in medical school back in North Carolina. And he'd moved out here during my last year of medical school. And I actually tracked him down because I hadn't kept in touch with him. He was someone I knew who he was, but he didn't know me. But the internet and some certain practices didn't have the most, savvy savvy setups at the time. So he had a website, but there was no contact information other than their phone number and their fax number. So what did I do? I went old school. I typed a letter, sent it by fax, included my contact information, and we connected. I came out to visit and checked out into the actual reimbursements for what I do. And it checked out that things actually were a lot more favorable. So you could have more time with your family, work same amount, make more money, work a little less, make, same amount of money. And it just seemed good for lifestyles. And so we tried not to like it because it was so far, so dark, so cold. But they kept calling us back, even after checking out other parts of the country. We looked in Texas, looked in Maryland, a number of places, but this seemed to be the best fit for us, and not just for financial reasons. The people here generally seem really nice, really seem to enjoy what they do and enjoy living here. You don't end up here by mistake, So we've been out here ever since. I started the practice in January of 2015, moved out and actually opened the doors in March, and we have been growing and expanding since then.
Thank you so much for just bringing us on that journey in terms of how y'all East Coasters ended up all the way up in Alaska and what brought you there. Can you provide more insight into making that leap from working for another firm, and you had shared you weren't happy at all, and you started looking at some of the numbers and it made sense, but why open up your own place, right? Focused on
Right.
what you focus on.
I'm glad you asked. So, as you mentioned, I looked at the numbers and the numbers made sense. What prompted me to leave is because numbers there actually didn't make sense. And so
Right.
I found that the way I conducted myself at with my former employer, I actually opened a new office for them, and I was, kind of in charge of that and making sure things are going and hitting our clinical targets and things of that nature. Part of that is making sure your utilization is, where it needs to be, and that you're not wasteful. And I realized I'm doing this work for somebody else. I could be doing it for myself.
Mm.
Then, when you start to look at your compensation and you realize that the compensation model is skewed in a sense that you're never going to be properly compensated for what you do. For instance, there was a certain amount that we could make, but the rest of it had to go towards overhead. Certainly, overhead at some point is fixed. You paid your rent, you paid everyone that's staff, and you should really share in the rest of those profits. But it just it was never palatable to me the way that was split up. And so I was like, hey, I'm doing all this work for someone else. I'm working as if it's my own place. I should probably look at starting my own place. So that was, the financial side of things where that didn't make sense, in addition to the clinical side of things where you can be your own boss. You can do things the way you want to do. If you have a patient, we're in interventional pain management, so it's clinical medical practice. But if you have a patient that falls upon hard times and they can't make a payment, I don't have to rely on the policy. I can say, hey, we're going to waive the fees for this particular patient. And, you don't have to worry about someone yelling at you in the back room for that. So we
Right.
enjoyed that.
Right. And can you share a little bit more about why this field of medicine that you're in is one that called to you, and why you decided that that was what you wanted to pursue with your life?
Yeah. So certainly. Um, and my story may be different from other people's, but, my journey to medicine, it was a bit personal, in that my father, well, first of all, I was one of the youngest people in my family. So I have cousins and everyone that's at least 10 or 15 years older. My parents had us a little later in life. And so a lot of their aunts and uncles that we go visit regularly were relatively elderly, when we were kids, or at least they seemed that way when I was 5 and 6. Now, when I meet someone who's 50 or 60, they don't seem so old. But we go visit them, and they had their health issues. And so sometimes it's at hospitals and things of that nature. But when I was, I guess, about 10 years old, my father was diagnosed with leukemia. And I would go to a lot of his visits with them and spend a lot of time with him in various medical settings. And that really kind of solidified my desire to want to go into medicine. I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. I thought I would do primary care, maybe even psychiatry. But as time moved on and I progressed in my education and had different exposures, I found anesthesiology to be kind of a passion. And what I do now is a subspecialty of anesthesiology called interventional pain management, which is an interesting story. So anesthesiologists, you think of them putting people to sleep, waking them up. is what they actually get paid to do, is wake them up. But you also see them in the setting of obstetrics and deliveries for babies. They provide the epidural for the ladies to relieve that pain, and if they have general anesthesia, they take care of that. But they realize, if you put a steroid in the same space that you put that local anesthetic, you can relieve pain. So anesthesiologists initially started coming between cases and injecting steroids in people's spinal canals to relieve inflammation.
Right.
And it kind of caught on and became its own specialty. So throughout medical school, I really liked anesthesiology because it incorporated a lot of the things that I enjoyed, which is, how do drugs work, the pharmacology of it, how does the body work, the physiology of it. It really was like primary care, but it's in fast forward. If you go in and see your primary care doctor and you have hypertension, they give you medication and say, come back in a month or 3 months, and we'll see how you're doing. Here, it's more of an instant gratification where you see a problem, you fix a problem, patient comes out of surgery doing great. And so I really like that part of it. What I missed was the long-term interactions. So you wake the patient up, they go to recovery room, you may see them one more time after that, and you never see them again. With interventional pain management, it's, again, you're taking people and you're solving a problem. They come in, they can't cook or clean or just do their activities of daily living because of painful conditions. And these are young people that may have a disc herniation, or older people that may have spinal canal narrowing. And you take them and you hopefully make them a much better and more functional person. And they come back in a few weeks and they tell you how great things are and how much better life is. And it just makes you feel really good and warm and fuzzy inside. So that
There
really
it
drew
is.
me. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis now.
All right. Thank you so much for connecting those dots for us, right? Your passion, how you fell into this space, and then, what brought you from being over in Virginia now to Alaska,
Mhm.
establishing your business out there. Can you tell us what's one really exciting thing about your business today?
Most exciting is there are a lot of cutting edge things that we do. It sounds, high tech and sci-fi, but one of the most exciting things that we do is what's called spinal cord stimulation.
Okay.
So before, let's say if you had a disc herniation and you have pain shooting down your leg or down your arm, you might go in to see the surgeon and they fix that. They take the disc, remove the part of the disc or the part of the bone that's causing the issue, and you would think that the pain would go away. Sometimes that does not happen. The pain becomes persistent. There's nothing else they can do surgically to make you feel any better. And so in the past, people relied on medications, drugs, and things of that nature. And there's still some places for those, especially the nerve specific drugs. But what this does is we implant a device, sort of like a pacemaker, and it sends signals up to the brain that it's like in Star Wars, it uses the force. It says, you do not hurt. And magically the pain goes away. It's much more complicated than that. But and the long and short of it is we put a device in and it stimulates the spinal cord or specific nerves directly and overpowers those pain signals and allows you to get your life back without having to rely on drugs
Okay.
or as many drugs. And, that just really is, really exciting on a day-to-day basis. And then just seeing the improvement in people's lives and functions and hearing them tell us how they're able to go to their child's wedding or, their child's graduation or their some other meaningful event that they didn't think they would be able to make it to.
Mm, because the pain was so debilitating before you were able to help them with that.
Indeed.
Thank you for sharing that. From a finance perspective, right? Where did you get the money to initially start your business?
So I told you earlier how Alaska was a very special place. So we came out to visit, initially just looking around. And there's another side story. If we have enough time, I'll go into it later. But we're staying at our hotel and we get a call from a banker. And the banker comes to our hotel and meets us at the hotel and says, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. And she stays in touch with us. And then when I decided for sure I wanted to move out and start a practice, she actually helped set everything up, and again, I'm a planner in that I don't want to spend money that I don't have, and I don't really want to create a lot of debt. So I
Right.
found a lot of ways to minimize that. The system that we use to keep our charts and records, there's a fee for that, but their fee is a percentage of what you bring in. So for the first few months, we're not bringing in anything, so I don't pay them anything. So all I
Right.
really needed was basic operating expenses for rent, for employees, and then we, would utilize other local resources like the surgery centers to do procedures until we had enough volume that it made sense to acquire more equipment to do things in our office. And so,
Excellent.
uh,
Excellent.
mhm.
So it was thanks to effectively a very forward-looking and welcoming banker in the
Mhm.
area. You were able to get some of that funding, and I'm assuming as well from your own personal savings, right?
Um, Believe it or not, I didn't really have to touch my savings very much except for our
Okay.
living expenses because, as fate would have it, I effectively didn't have a job, right? I was creating my own job. So there's no paycheck there. And my wife had just gone out on maternity leave, which again that's a big driver as well. Is like, hey, we have to make it or my kids won't eat. so,
Right, right,
of course, you go out and do the marketing and then door to door if I have time and go out and meet people and tell them, hey, this is what I do. If you have pain, come by and see me. Um, but we actually were able to get out of debt to the bank before that first year was over. We
Oh,
actually caught up
wow,
on
that's
all of our
incredible. So that
yeah,
kinda leads me into this next question of how much revenue did you make that first year
right.
that you were in
So
business?
yeah, and keeping in mind that with medical in the medical field, there's a little delay. So unless you're doing cash pay services like cosmetics, most of the things that go through insurance, you see the patient, you submit notes, and the insurance company decides if they're going to pay you or not. So there's a little delay. So we probably didn't get our first check until July of that year. But between July and December, we brought in about $425,000, which you know expenses have to come out of
Nice.
that. But it certainly was better than I was expecting for being in a brand new place where no one, except for maybe one person, knew me before I came, and kind of really
Right.
just doing everything from scratch.
Right, and compare that now to what's your expected revenue, or was your revenue by end of last year?
So we probably would be higher, but of course, COVID has affected a lot
Right.
of the bottom lines. But we're probably averaging somewhere around 1.8 million to 2 million per year. And again, that would likely be higher if there weren't for these COVID interruptions. Matter of fact, it put us out of business for about 4 to 6 weeks in 2020, where they shut down and said no medical procedures or anything can happen. And so that was certainly challenging.
Yeah. And so just listening to that range, right? And you spoke about some of the marketing that you were doing during that time. What has helped in terms of getting foot traffic in a place where, like you said before, you didn't know anyone, so here you are coming out the blue and engaging with these different facilities that may be doing surgeries or trying to build rapport with the community. How did you get people to start trusting and leveraging your services? What were some of the steps you took?
Yeah. So after door to door, I know I'd go out every day for some period of time, and I remember sitting in my office being a little bit dejected because I told you, my wife wasn't working, I wasn't working.
Right,
Well, I was working but not getting paid,
right.
and I knew they were going to be moving out here. I came a few months before they did. I'd be moving out, they'd be moving out, and wanted to be able to provide for them. Phone had not rung even one time. So I
Mm.
remember it was a Friday afternoon, about 10 minutes to 5, and the phone rang. And I was the only one working there. So, of course, I answered it. And I was like, hold on, let me get Dr. Gay for you. And so we answered the phone, and it's a surgeon. It was actually one office that I went in. I went in every office in the hospital complex that we set our office up in. And it was an office that I went in. But before I went, I thought to myself, why even waste the time? They're unlikely to have many patients for me. It was a thoracic surgeon that does, a lot of things with the lungs and, ribs and stuff like that. Most
Okay.
common for us is a
Thank you
spine
for
surgeon.
explaining that because I was like, "What is thoracic?"
Right,
Appreciate
right.
that. Continue.
Yeah, so yeah, they're usually, cardiothoracic surgeon, heart, chest, lungs. And so this is not the most common thing that gets sent to a pain management. Most commonly we're dealing with spine surgeons and maybe orthopedic surgeons. And so
Okay.
I'm a little hesitant, but I go in the office anyway. I talk to them, say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and give me a call if you ever have a patient. And that was my first referral, was from them. They had a patient that had a rib fracture and they could not make the pain go away. So they sent them up and said, basically, see what you can do. And a lot of that was the beginning, where you get, the tough cases that, no one else has been able to solve, or, no one wanted to take them because of their, maybe the insurance that they had. And so you get those, you do a good job for the people that come in, and then you get the word of mouth. They go back and they tell their provider, or they surprise their provider. We're like, hey, I feel great. Whereas before I didn't. And now the provider doesn't have that person complaining to them about pain. And they say, well, I've got a few more over here. And they gradually send it. And so it became more of a word of mouth thing. And I think more than anything, just also being out in the community. So I try to support community events, meet people, tell them what I do. And then if it's a meaningful event, like we've been a big supporter of the American Cancer Society every year. Again, it's got personal reasons for me, but we've supported that. And, people and other physicians are there, and you mingle with them and tell them what you do. And maybe you get a referral, maybe you don't, but you've gotten your name out there and it's a little name recognition. So someone says, "Hey, I was thinking about going to see Dr. Gay." They're like, "Oh, never heard of him." And it kind of would be a little off putting. But like, yeah, I
Right.
met him. He's a nice guy. Go check him out. And so it just really getting out there and just meeting the people that are there, whether they're referring providers or whether they're potential patients.
I love it. I really appreciate how you've taken us on a journey where, for most people, to get up, move all the way across the country. And when I say all the way across the country, like out of the 48 continuous states, up there in the upper leftmost sort of corner of the Americas, if you will, as well as stepping into a realm where you really didn't know anyone at all. Right. And so here you are establishing a new business and you need to connect with the community because that's where your business truly comes from. So you've laid out some really big challenges that you've been able to overcome. Are there any other big challenges that you'd like to share that you've had to overcome and how you've overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge certainly would be COVID. And hopefully no one has to face anything similar to that in the future. But, we were shut down for 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and you have employees and you think about, hey, we're not bringing in revenue. Maybe we shouldn't be putting out any salary, but they have lives and they have responsibilities and they have kids and families. And so I think, the biggest obstacle there was balancing how do you take care of your people, while also taking care of your business. And
Mm,
what I chose to do at the time was, we were doing great up until that point. And so there's a little bit of room for me to reduce my salary and keep them employed. And, we made it through that period and we didn't have to lay off anyone or anything like that. And so we kept all of our staff, all of our employees. But there's some places that I know did made other decisions, and I don't know what their finances look like. But I think maintaining a sense of responsibility to your people and also fiscal responsibility. And there are other fancier offices. I think my office is nice, but I've seen some that had, the fancy glass where you can see through it and you press a button and then it's opaque. You can't see. And I was like, oh, that looks great. But, that wasn't something that was in my budget. And,
right.
that,
And it's
that,
not
that, all,
necessarily a necessity.
right, right. And so, certainly when it came down to finding funds to keep our people gainfully employed, I was glad that we, did have some reserves in those situations. But yeah, that was the biggest business challenge. And then the rest is just balancing family life with work life. You can easily work all day and all night, but you have people that are, looking for you to play a role in their life and building their lives as opposed to just building your business.
Yeah, yeah. Legacy hustlers, I hope you are appreciating some of the things that Dr. Gay has been talking about, right? So Chris just mentioned the fact that he had to throttle his own paycheck in terms of really thinking about the other lives that he was impacting through his business, right? Being his employees and ensuring that during the course of the pandemic, there weren't negative repercussions, if you will, for anyone's pay, which could have trickle down effects in their own households. And he made a decision to throttle back what was going on with his personal pay. So, a very, very powerful lesson in terms of leadership. And sometimes when you are at the helm of a business, the things that you need to do to ensure that you stay afloat and you have a sort of culture and environment where your employees want to stay long term. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Any big or major sacrifices that you've had to make for your business up to this point in time?
Um, I say the biggest sacrifice is time. Again, you're leaving your family, and sometimes it requires you to be away from home, and so um, you don't know everything. And I think that's an important thing to realize when you start a business is that there's going to be so much more that you need to learn. So I've done several business training courses, and some of them take me away for a week at a time. In addition to your continuing medical education that's required and things like that. So I'd say the biggest sacrifice is time. And again, making sure that you're taking care of everybody. You're taking care of your employees at work. You're taking care of your family at home. And most importantly, taking care of yourself. And if you're
Mm,
not around, a lot of things can go bad, whether it's with the business, your family, or just in life itself. So I think making sure you are okay first. And that's physical, mental, not just financial. And then looking out for everybody else that, depend on you.
there it is. As you take a step back and think about the Alaska Center for Pain Relief and where you're at today, where would you like to be another 10 years from now with this firm and this company?
It's a great question. So, we struggle with that sometimes because one, we're in a little bit of a geographically isolated area. So recruiting new physicians and new providers is a little bit more difficult than if we lived in a big metropolitan city where people are constantly moving and could drive. So we've experimented with expanding before we went out and opened a second office, and that was going well. I had another doctor that was working here part time. Things changed, and shortly after COVID, that doctor had to leave, and we contracted back down to one, which is actually good for me because that office was about an hour away, and I'd go up there like twice a week. So again,
Mm,
we talked about time from family. The roads here aren't always so great in the wintertime. There's ice and treachery around every corner, and
right.
so just the pullback from that has been useful. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about, do I want to expand more? How would I like to expand? And I think more than anything, it's being able to kind of offer our services to people. And we do a lot through telehealth and just reach people where they are so we can tell them at least what their options are, even if we're not the ones that actually deliver the care. So I would like to probably see it expand more into a consultancy type of role for patients that are out there, and even other providers that say, hey, I have this list of patients. I'd like to meet with you, and maybe have like a roundtable of what your thoughts would be, and maybe even a multidisciplinary type of roundtable online where we're talking with, psychologists, because that's big in pain, physical therapists, chiropractors, all the people that help support, the goal that we're trying to reach with patients.
There it is. Thank you for sharing that and just talking through some of the things that you have thought about doing and some of the things that you are looking to do. We're going to transition now into what we call our 5 minute hustle. And it's just going to be a call and response segment where our legacy hustlers get an opportunity to hear from you some of the things that fill your cup, some of the things that help motivate you, as well as resources you may leverage and use. So, one of the first things I always start off with is, what initially held you back from becoming an entrepreneur?
Initially, I didn't want to be one. When I first finished medical school, and our training in medical school, you don't get any business classes or courses or anything like that. So, the pipeline was, you go to medical school, you go do residency training, you do some specialty fellowship if you choose, and then you go and you get a job. And so my mindset coming out of training was, let me find the best job I can find. Instead of thinking about what is it that really drives me, what is it that I really want to deliver to patients, and how do I want to do this? And so um, I think I probably was ill prepared when I went in for my interview for the job. And I'm just like, hey, what questions do y'all want to ask me? And I didn't really know what I wanted enough to see if they could give me what I needed as well. So it was really the noticing what was missing and what I hadn't fulfilled for myself and wasn't able to fulfill for my patients, which drove me to be an entrepreneur. I'm not one of those people that spends the whole life, serial entrepreneur selling, magazines when they're kids and this and that and the other. So I did have a pretty lucrative now and later business when I was in fifth grade. I had a little fanny pack and I kept now and laters and buying for 5 cents and selling for 25. That probably was my first entrepreneurial exploit. But other than that, I didn't have a serial history of, having businesses, and just knew I was going to be a business owner. But it
Yeah.
grew into what it was, and I'm glad for the journey that I've been on to reach where I am today.
There it is. There it is. Um, as you reflect on some of the best business advice you've received, right? Because you've clearly told us that you weren't necessarily an entrepreneur before. And so it's one of those things that you've been on of recent years. What would you say is the best business advice you've received that has been instrumental or really helped you as you've embarked on this journey?
It'll sound really simple, but you hear this over and over in different circles, but start with the why. Why is it that you want to be an entrepreneur? What is it that you want to get out of it? Um, why are you doing it? It's just kind of, if you're doing it just because you want to start a business, it's not going to be fulfilling. And those late nights are not fun. If it's something that you really feel passionate about, then it certainly makes it not seem like work. And so, again, I've embraced opportunities to learn more about, business and things that I didn't know before I started this. And it certainly made the pathway a lot more smooth. But really just getting in touch with why you want to do what you think you want to do, and why people will want to come and utilize whatever goods or services you're offering. And so what makes you different? And so finding your value proposition is certainly necessary in starting a new business.
Legacy hustlers, what you hear Chris talking about is just obvious. Finding your why. What is your passion? What is it that drives and motivates you? When you look at the world and what's going on, what is it that you want to solve, right? And being able to bring that to bear. You have your talents, you have your skill sets, you have your gifts that you've been bestowed upon, that has been bestowed upon you. What are you looking to do with those to help others around you and solve those problems? That's what he's getting at with the comments he just made. So, Chris, as you think about a business book, magazine, podcast, etc., something that you tap into on a regular basis, or that you go to for energy and to fill you back up for the world of business, what would that be?
It's interesting you should ask. I'm not a traditionalist where I would say, I read this business book or that business book. I read books that try to help me understand me and help me understand people that I'm working with. And so I'm currently in the middle of a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And it really talks about, kind of your system one and system two. It's kind of your reactionary system versus how you respond to things if you actually sit and meaningfully think about, what's being presented in front of you. And it even tells you how things that are very imperceptible can affect you, your decisions. There are lots of great pearls in the book, but even down to what time, let's say for parole hearings, those who happen around the time of lunchtime are very different, whether it's before the judge had lunch or after they had lunch. And so things like that just matter for people. And so it becomes important in marketing if you have a business, becomes important in discussing or closing deals if you're in a business where you're kind of face to face. Maybe you decide to have a lunch meeting or a meeting after lunch, or you decide, hey, this is not the best time if I want to accomplish this. So I wouldn't say that's specifically a business book, but I use it to help me in my business. Others are probably more motivational. There's one by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. And it talks about how adversity, you can turn that into a positive. There's a lot of self-help books that are just smile and smell the roses and life will be great. But life isn't always great for everybody, And unfortunately, there's some things that, say necessity is the mother of all invention. There's some people that will become entrepreneurs because they have no other choice. And so for them to be able to look at whatever their adverse situation is, turn that into a motivating or a positive factor, I think is very important. So those are the types of things that I read to make me realize that, hey, no matter how bad things are going around me or whatever may be happening in life or in the world, there may be a silver lining at some point.
And just to further punctuate what Chris is talking about right now, right? And I try to share this, and hopefully you're hearing it as we've engaged other entrepreneurs as well. But the ability to recognize that this journey that you're either currently on or you're setting to get ready to embark upon is not going to always be easy. It's not always going to be roses, like Chris just said. And so you need to be prepared for some of the downturns or points where things may not go exactly as planned, and you'll have to forge through it. So I love the fact that Dr. Ye has shared with us this book that you can take a look at and see if it helps inspire and keep you motivated as you go through those down troughs as well. So last question here. What would be a favorite online tool, app, internet resource that you use for your business today that you didn't know about before you had your business, but now cannot see yourself living without?
So again, being in a situation where I try to conserve funds and not spend them if I don't have to, I have not engaged traditionally a full marketing firm. There are lots of firms out there that say, hey, pay us money and we'll do everything for you. But I realized that the products that I produce look like, a fifth grade's project. And so the
like
website
you were selling now and later's out of fanny pack.
Exactly. So the website that's really made a difference is one called Upwork, where you can kind of connect with various, whether it's marketing, websites, you name it, people that have expertise in these areas, and you kind of name the price that you want to have the job completed at, and they will kind of bid for the business, and you can see what their past projects have looked like, and you pick somebody that connects well with you. So that's been the biggest, I guess, technology or website that's made a difference for us on a day-to-day basis that I and
And let
no
me dig into that just a
exposure.
little bit here because I have honestly been intimidated by Upwork a little bit. I have
Mhm.
not actually leveraged or utilized it yet because there's so many different sorts of individuals that are out there, right? So, how do you identify the right person for what you're trying to do um, when there's so many of those options that are laid there? Like,
Yeah,
what
sometimes it's
journey do
hard.
you go on?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, but basically, I'll set up the project that I want done, and I'll set up the price I want it done for, and kind of see who bites. And then I'll look at their body of work, and then we kind of have like a little interview, ask them questions back and forth, and you see how they respond. Some of them are quick. By the time I've typed the period, they're sending a response back. Others maybe a few hours or a few days. And granted, there's some people are in different parts of the world, so there's some time differences. But you want to find that person that has the skills and the hunger to complete your job. So just like in business, if you're a little laissez-faire and it's like, hey, I'm going to start a business and people will come, you probably won't do well. You want to find this person that's looking to do well. And I look at their reviews, how much money they've made. So based on what they're charging, it'll say they made this amount in the last year. So it's like, hey, a lot of people are using them and they got good feedback. So that's kind of how I've narrowed it down. Sometimes it's just been very close where it's like, all right, I've got three, they look great, I'm just going to pick one.
There it is.
But yeah, it certainly is a lot of options there, and you can really go get lost in that rabbit hole.
So there it is. So using Upwork, he takes time, looks at a person's portfolio, looks at the history of what they've been able to accomplish and do, checks and sees how responsive they are to when he reaches out in what they're coming back with. And then the ability to also just sort of check, okay, how much money have they made over the past whatever time period it lays out. And that gives you a sense of how in tune they are with being able to execute work and execute on deliverables that are coming their way and how serious they are as well. And so those are some of the criteria that he uses when he's tapping into Upwork. Dr. Gay, I got to say thank you so much for coming on
Sure.
the show and being so absolutely transparent about setting up a business that you were absolutely clueless on, right? In a place where you just didn't know anything about before you got there. And now you absolutely love it. And you've created this model that hopefully others can emulate if they're curious about getting into a realm like this. Any last words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our legacy hustlers with?
I actually have two, if I may take the liberty. So
Of
one of
course.
my uh, most influential people in life was my fifth grade history teacher. Name was Mr. Liverman, Thomas Liverman, and he passed away last year. But one of the first time I ever heard this quote was from him. He kind of ingrained it in us: "Good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good turns to better and your better turns to best." So that is kind of how I approach everything in life. Is I don't want to do it half-heartedly. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Um, and a personal quote for me is: "Don't be afraid to fail, but always have a contingency plan."
Mm, there it is. Thank you so much again, Dr. Gay. Legacy Hustlers, until next time, don't stand in the way of your own dreams. All right. What's up, Legacy Hustlers? I hope your cup is overflowing with inspiration, motivation, and knowledge after listening to our guests today. And if it was, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, comment, and share with your friends so we can continue to grow the base of listeners. Shout outs to Chris from Sideline Records for always producing an amazing episode. Jonathan Leonard, we see you. Thank you for the intro music. And to our listeners, until the next time we connect, please don't get in your own way in the pursuit of your dreams.